Imagine diving into the ocean. At first, everything feels normal. Sunlight dances on the surface. Fish swim peacefully around you. But as you go deeper, the light fades, the temperature drops, and the ocean becomes something else entirely. Now imagine reaching a depth where no fish swim, no plants grow, no life survives. A place so extreme that even the toughest creatures on Earth simply cannot exist. Scientists call it the ocean dead zone. And what you're about to discover is more terrifying than anything in the deep sea. Most people think the ocean is full of life everywhere, but that's not true. The ocean is divided into layers, each one more hostile than the last. The sunlight zone, the twilight zone, the midnight zone, the abyss, and finally, the deepest parts of the ocean. Each layer removes something essential for life. First, light disappears, then warmth, then oxygen, and eventually, you reach areas where life begins to struggle, and then completely stops. A dead zone is an area of the ocean where oxygen levels are so low that most living creatures cannot survive. And oxygen is everything. Fish need it, crabs need it, even microscopic organisms depend on it. Without oxygen, life suffocates. In these zones, fish flee, if they can. Slow-moving creatures die, entire ecosystems collapse, and what's left? A silent, empty underwater wasteland. This is where things get even more shocking. Some dead zones are natural, but many are caused by humans. Here's how it happens. Fertilizers from farms wash into rivers. Rivers carry those chemicals into the ocean. These nutrients trigger massive algae blooms. The algae grow uncontrollably, then die. Bacteria break them down, consuming all the oxygen. And just like that, the oxygen disappears, creating a zone where nothing can breathe. This process has a name: eutrophication, and it's happening all over the world. Some of these zones are absolutely massive. One of the largest appears every year in the Gulf of Mexico, an area so big it can stretch for thousands of square kilometers. Imagine an underwater desert, wider than entire cities, and it's not alone. There are hundreds of dead zones across the planet, and they are growing fast. When a dead zone forms, life doesn't just vanish instantly. First comes panic. Fish sense the danger and try to escape toward oxygen-rich waters. But not everything can move fast enough. Crabs, starfish, shellfish, they become trapped and slowly they suffocate. Entire food chains begin to collapse. Predators lose their prey, ecosystems fall apart, and eventually the area becomes completely lifeless. But here's something even more mysterious. Some parts of the ocean have always been deadly. Far below the surface, there are regions where pressure is crushing. Temperatures are near freezing. Oxygen is almost non-existent. In some of these places, even bacteria struggle to survive. Scientists have explored areas where, for long periods, nothing lives at all. No movement, no sound, no life, just endless darkness. You might be wondering, is it really possible that nothing can live there? In some cases, a few extremophiles manage to survive. These are organisms that can handle conditions that would instantly kill most life. But even they have limits. In the harshest zones, even extremophiles struggle to exist, which makes these places some of the most hostile environments on Earth. And this is what makes it truly terrifying. The ocean covers more than 70% of our planet, and it produces a huge portion of the oxygen we breathe. Now imagine parts of it dying. Dead zones are expanding every year, which means less marine life, less biodiversity, more imbalance in ecosystems. And if this continues, the impact won't stay underwater. It could affect the entire planet. This isn't just an ocean problem. It's a warning, a signal that something is changing. human activity is slowly altering the balance of nature. And the ocean, the most powerful ecosystem on Earth, is starting to feel it. Somewhere in the ocean right now, there is a place where no fish swim, no creatures move, no life exists. A silent zone where the ocean itself feels empty. And the scariest part? These zones are spreading. If nothing changes, places that once teemed with life could become places where nothing survives. But what if I told you there are places in the ocean where even reaching them is almost impossible? Not because of monsters, not because of darkness, but because the environment itself will destroy anything that enters. As you go deeper into the ocean, the pressure increases rapidly. At just 10 meters underwater, you already feel it. At 100 meters, it becomes dangerous. At 1,000 meters, the pressure is over 100 times greater than what you feel on land. Now imagine going even deeper, down to the deepest trenches on Earth, places like the Mariana Trench. Here, the pressure is so extreme that if a human body were suddenly exposed to it, it wouldn't survive. Machines struggle to function. Submarines must be specially designed, and even then, exploration is incredibly rare. But pressure isn't the only problem. There's something else, something even more invisible and more deadly. The complete absence of oxygen. In most parts of the ocean, oxygen enters from the surface. Waves mix air into the water. Currents distribute it. Marine plants produce it through photosynthesis. But as you descend deeper, less oxygen reaches those depths. And in some regions, it stops completely. No circulation, no mixing, no fresh oxygen supply. Just stagnant, suffocating water. These areas are sometimes called oxygen minimum zones, and inside them, life begins to disappear. At first, only the most sensitive species vanish. Fish that require high oxygen levels simply leave. Then, more tolerant creatures begin to struggle. Their movements slow, their bodies weaken, and eventually, even the toughest organisms cannot survive. What remains is a boundary, a line in the ocean where life ends. Cross it, and everything changes. Scientists studying these zones have made a chilling observation. When oxygen levels drop below a certain point, marine life doesn't just decline, it collapses. Suddenly, as if a switch has been turned off. One moment there is movement, the next, nothing. No fish, no predators, no activity, just empty water. And yet, these zones are not fixed. They move, they expand, they shrink. They shift with currents and seasons, which means an area full of life today could become a dead zone tomorrow. Imagine an entire ecosystem waking up into a world where it can no longer breathe. But here's where things become even more disturbing. Dead zones don't just kill marine life, they transform the chemistry of the ocean itself. Without oxygen, different processes begin to take over. Bacteria that thrive in low oxygen environments start producing toxic substances. One of them is hydrogen sulfide, a gas that smells like rotten eggs, and in high concentrations, it's deadly. Not just to marine life, but to almost anything. There have been rare events in Earth's history where oceans released massive amounts of this gas, and the results were catastrophic. Some scientists believe these events may have contributed to mass extinctions. Now think about that. Entire sections of the ocean turning toxic. Not just lifeless, but dangerous. And yet, despite all of this, the ocean still holds surprises. Because in some dead zones, life doesn't completely disappear. It changes. Strange organisms begin to appear. Creatures that don't rely on oxygen the way we do. Bacteria that use chemicals instead of air to survive. Microbial life forms that seem almost alien. They don't need sunlight. They don't need oxygen. They survive in conditions that would kill almost everything else on Earth. But even these life forms have limits, and beyond those limits there is truly nothing, a true void. Not empty like space, but empty of life. One of the most unsettling discoveries made by scientists is how silent these zones are. Normally, the ocean is full of sound. Waves, movement, creatures communicating. But inside a dead zone, there is almost nothing. No movement, no activity, just stillness. A kind of silence that feels unnatural. And if you could somehow stand there, at the edge of one of these zones, you would notice something strange. On one side, life, fish swimming, creatures moving, energy. On the other side, nothing. A sharp contrast, like crossing an invisible border between two completely different worlds. But here's the real danger. These zones are increasing, year after year. As human activity continues, more nutrients enter the ocean, more algae blooms form, more oxygen gets consumed, and more areas turn into dead zones. Some scientists warn that if this trend continues, dead zones could begin to merge, forming larger and larger regions where life cannot survive. Imagine entire sections of the ocean becoming uninhabitable, not just for fish, but for everything. And this doesn't stay underwater, because the ocean is deeply connected to life on land. It regulates climate, it produces oxygen, it supports food chains. When parts of it begin to die, the effects spread. Fisheries collapse, food supplies are affected, ecosystems lose balance, and slowly the impact reaches us. But perhaps the most chilling thought is this. The ocean is still largely unexplored. More than 80% of it remains unknown, which means there could be dead zones we haven't even discovered yet, hidden regions where life has already disappeared, silent, unseen, waiting. And somewhere, in the deepest parts of the ocean, there may be places so extreme, so completely devoid of oxygen, so chemically hostile, that nothing has ever lived there, not even once. Think about that. On a planet full of life, there are places where life has never existed. And yet, those places are growing, slowly, quietly, expanding into areas that once supported thriving ecosystems, turning life into silence, movement into stillness, oceans into emptiness. If nothing changes, the question is no longer, do dead zones exist, but rather, how big will they become? And how much of the ocean will they take with them? Because the scariest part isn't that these zones exist, it's that we are helping create them, and the ocean is starting to show the consequences. And the deeper scientists look, the more unsettling the discoveries become. Because dead zones aren't just empty, they leave behind evidence, clues of what used to be there. On the ocean floor, researchers have found something disturbing. Mass graveyards, not of one species, but of entire ecosystems. Shells scattered across the seabed, crabs frozen in place, fish lying where they once swam, all caught in the moment when oxygen disappeared. No struggle marks, no sign of escape, just sudden silence. It's like time stopped. One moment, everything was alive. The next, nothing. And what's even more chilling is how fast it can happen. In some cases, dead zones can form in a matter of days. A sudden algae bloom, a rapid drop in oxygen, and within a short time, thousands of creatures are gone. Fishermen sometimes witness this firsthand. They return to waters that once provided food, only to find emptiness. No fish, no movement, just water that feels wrong. In extreme cases, mass die-offs occur. Fish float to the surface in huge numbers, covering the water like a silent warning, a sign that something below has gone terribly wrong. But even then, what you see on the surface is only a small part of the story, because most of the destruction happens far below, hidden in the darkness. And there's something else most people don't realize. Dead zones don't just remove oxygen, they can trap heat. In some regions, layers of water stop mixing completely. Warm water stays above, cold water stays below, and the deeper layers become isolated, cut off from everything. No fresh oxygen, no circulation, no life. This creates a kind of underwater prison. Once oxygen is used up, it cannot be replaced, and anything trapped inside has no way out. Now imagine being a creature living there. At first, everything feels normal, but slowly, breathing becomes harder. Your body weakens, your movements slow down, and you don't understand why. There's no predator, no visible danger, just the feeling that something is missing. Until it's too late. And perhaps the most disturbing part is that many creatures don't even try to escape, because they can't detect the danger in time. By the time they realize, they are already trapped. This is why dead zones are so deadly. They don't chase, they don't attack, they don't make a sound. They simply remove the one thing every living creature needs, and the ocean becomes a place where survival is no longer possible. But let's go even deeper, because not all lifeless zones are caused by oxygen loss alone. Some are caused by something far more extreme: underwater lakes. Yes, lakes inside the ocean. It sounds impossible, but they exist, and they are some of the most hostile places on Earth. These lakes are made of extremely salty water, so dense that they don't mix with the surrounding ocean. Instead, they form separate pools on the seafloor, with clear boundaries, like a lake within another world. But here's the terrifying part. These underwater lakes are often completely toxic, filled with chemicals like methane and hydrogen sulfide. If a fish swims into one, it dies almost instantly. Scientists have observed this. Creatures drifting too close, crossing the invisible edge, and suddenly going still, falling into the lake, never to return. It's like a trap. Silent, invisible, deadly. Even crabs and other bottom dwellers avoid these places. They gather near the edges but never cross, as if they somehow know what lies beyond. And at the bottom of these lakes, nothing. No life, no movement, just toxic, suffocating liquid. These are some of the closest things on Earth to truly lifeless environments. But even they are not the end, because there are places even more extreme. Deep beneath the ocean floor, there are regions where oxygen hasn't existed for millions of years. Ancient pockets of water, trapped and isolated, cut off from the surface, cut off from life. In these places, conditions are so extreme that scientists debate whether anything can survive at all. No light, no oxygen, no energy sources, just stillness that has lasted for geological time. If life exists there, it would be unlike anything we know. And if it doesn't, then these are places where Earth itself has created true voids. And that raises a question, a very unsettling one. If parts of our own planet can become completely lifeless, what does that say about other worlds? Scientists study these extreme ocean zones to understand places like Mars or the icy moons of Jupiter. Because if life can't survive here, in Earth's oceans, then where else could it exist? But there's another side to this, a more immediate one. Because while some lifeless zones are ancient, others are new, created in just decades. Which means we are watching lifeless environments form in real time. Areas that were once full of fish, now empty. Regions that supported entire ecosystems, now silent. And the speed of this change is what worries scientists the most. Because ecosystems don't just disappear, they collapse. And once they collapse, they are incredibly difficult to restore. Even if oxygen returns, life doesn't always come back, because the balance has been broken. Species have moved on, or died out completely, and what remains is a shadow of what once existed. Now imagine this happening on a global scale. More dead zones, more lifeless areas, more silence spreading through the ocean. It wouldn't just change the ocean, it would change the planet. Because the ocean is not separate from us. It is connected to everything. The air we breathe, the climate we live in, the food we eat. And when something this massive begins to change, the effects don't stay hidden forever. They rise, slowly but inevitably. And one day, the consequences reach the surface. But for now, most of this remains unseen, hidden beneath waves, far from human eyes, which makes it easy to ignore. But the ocean doesn't forget, and the signs are already there. Silent zones, growing in the dark. And maybe the most unsettling part of all is that the ocean doesn't need to make noise to warn us. There are no alarms, no flashing signs, no sudden explosions, just silence. A slow, quiet transformation. Somewhere right now, beneath the surface, a thriving ecosystem is changing. Fish are swimming through waters that feel slightly different. Currents are shifting. Oxygen levels are dropping. Just a little. Not enough to notice. Not yet. But over time, that little becomes everything. Breathing becomes harder. Movement becomes slower. Life becomes fragile. And then, without warning, it crosses a line no creature can see, a line no creature understands. But once it's crossed, there's no going back. The water is still there, the space is still there, but life is gone. And what replaces it is something far more disturbing than chaos. Nothing. No struggle, no sound, no movement. Just an empty piece of ocean, where something used to exist. Now imagine that happening. Not once, not twice, but again, and again, and again. Small, silent zones, slowly growing, spreading, connecting, until one day they are no longer small. They become regions, then massive areas, then entire systems where life can no longer survive. And the scariest part? Most people will never see it happen, because it doesn't look dramatic from the surface. The ocean still moves, the waves still crash, the horizon still looks the same. Everything appears normal, but underneath, everything is changing. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Because the greatest threats are not always the loudest. Sometimes they are the quietest, the ones that grow in silence, the ones that spread in darkness, the ones we don't notice until it's too late. Right now, there are places in the ocean where nothing lives. No fish, no plants, no movement. Just empty water, stretching into darkness. Places that were once alive, now completely silent. And those places are increasing, slowly, quietly, inevitably. The ocean has always been mysterious, vast, powerful, full of life. But now, in certain parts of it, there is something else. Absence. A reminder that even the largest, most powerful ecosystem on Earth is not invincible. And if something as massive as the ocean can begin to lose life without us even noticing, then the real question isn't, what is happening down there? It's, how long before we feel it up here? Because the ocean doesn't just belong to itself, it belongs to the planet, to every living thing, including us. And if the silence continues to spread, if more zones become lifeless, if the balance keeps shifting, then one day, the emptiness below won't stay below. It will rise, not as a wave, not as a storm, but as change. A change we can't ignore, a change we can't escape, and by the time we fully understand it, it might already be too late. So the next time you look at the ocean, think about what's beneath it. Not just the life, but the places where life no longer exists. The silent zones, the invisible boundaries, the parts of our planet where nothing survives. And remember, they're not just out there, they're growing. If this made you see the ocean differently, then you're starting to understand just how deep this really goes. Because the ocean isn't just hiding creatures, it's hiding consequences. And we're only beginning to discover them.